application email. Like they asked me to send them a bunch of material from church. And I sent them some recordings of me leading a service and stuff. And since I didn't have any recordings of me leading like an actual service, then I just recorded myself playing to a couple of worship songs, and that was as good as I could. So or could do it. So
recording on the drums,
on the piano. So I would just kind of go all in one take because I didn't want to keep pausing and then playing, because I just recorded with my phone. Like the actual audio was through my computer, but then the visual was just my phone camera. So I would just wave my hands in front of the camera and then give like a thumbs up as like before every take, so I can eventually find the one and line it up with the video, which is kind of funny. But
so when you sent it in, it was lined up with the video?
Yeah.
Nice.
It was kind of a weird process because I didn't want to buy like a nice I didn't want to buy speakers and like a nice set of speakers for my keyboard and try to like find my like a nice camera to buy too. Yeah. So my phone camera is just fine. Like it didn't really need to be anything extra.
Right.
More so the audio, I think, is they just wanted to see and hear how I just go through a song, I think. So it was fun.
Was that for your new position at the church as a worship leader?
Yep. So I applied to a couple places and it was just the same thing pretty much. So it was different songs for every place though, which was kind of fun because the church that I'm at now, they don't typically play like a ton of new stuff, right? It's more of like mid 2000s, pretty like late 2000s. So like this brand new stuff that comes out, probably not on their radar. It'd just be a little awkward for the people that are there, in like a good way, but not like, I'm complaining about it.
Right.
It's just a different style that they're used to. And some of the other places I applied to, they are very much like even like Res, I would say, like very like, let's play this more upbeat, like almost Pentecostal gospel type stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that you hear on the radio a little bit more. I'm not saying that it's bad, but definitely I'm used to hearing all that stuff.
It sounds like you're saying it's bad, Brandon.
I know, right? I'm used to hearing all that stuff already because I've been to different places, which is kind of nice. So sometimes I forget how many people back at home maybe are not used to going to a place like Res Life or like the Foundry is another one that's like kind of being like hip is the word, I guess.
Yeah, it's hip.
Yeah, that's not a word that I like using with church with that church, but it seems like
right. But I know what you're trying to say with it.
Yeah. I probably shouldn't be naming these churches either, but I'll try to refrain from that. I'm going to tell them.
I'm going to tag them in all the clips.
They just have like a massive spike in like Foundry viewers as everybody starts commenting. It's like, who is this guy? Good thing we didn't hire him.
Right. So are you just playing at that church that you're at right now, or are you still kind of...
So I'm worship directing. So I'm just planning out services, whatever the sermon is that week. Then I try to plan it out accordingly.
Yeah.
So that's the fun part. That's something that I enjoyed doing while I was interning there. Because I got to work with like the staff really closely, which I think is not typical in a bigger church. I think it's kind of like just focus more on the music side of things, and then if it so happens to line up with the word or the message, then that's fine. But I enjoy working closely with like the small staff that they have there, like the two or the one lead pastor, because I think some of the other places I've seen, it can kind of be like even at Res, where I was volunteering, it's like, the main worship pastor does his own thing.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the volunteers are kind of left, to do their thing, or like interns, like I think Mackenzie was interning at the time. And this is when I first started playing or volunteering to play. And like even the worship leaders for like specific ministries there, like young adults and in high school, they kind of are separate from.
So you're saying you like the fact that the whole team is kind of one team.
Yeah. That's a huge benefit, I think, in like working in as in like an actual like whole staff. sense.
Right. It's more of like a full community.
And I think it comes with its own challenges too, like for both sides of it.
Right.
Like at a bigger church, I think it can be hard to connect individually more because there's so many people. But at this church, like, plus I've grown up there, so I know most of the people that, like the older people that have been there for a while, and that helps. But it's definitely a lot closer knit. I feel like there are some things that that can be more personal, like when you're having conversations with people,
Right.
I don't have to like find a group and just hang out with them, but which is good. I really enjoy it. It kind of forces me to always be aware of what people may like, accommodating for not just volunteers, but kind of being more open to what people may be going through on a Sunday morning. It's
Right.
like not everybody wants to be there on a Sunday morning, so sometimes it's nice to kind of relate to that or just say something about it. It's like, hey, like, thanks for coming to worship with us this morning. Just like some of you may be going through something rough and like hear the scripture, or maybe have somebody come up and read scripture. Like it's fun.
Do you feel that being at a smaller church, you have more community with the congregation as a whole as well?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely feel that. It's like I've never worked at a huge church. I've only volunteered at one,
Right.
Or a couple. So I can't speak on like actually working at a place in terms of like staff, but in terms of like getting to know people, I feel like is a lot easier for sure at my home church, since it's like 200-300 people. And then some of the bigger places I've been to, there's between like one or two services, there's probably like 1,000 people or pretty close. Right.
Yep.
And yeah, definitely can feel like you can get lost sometimes. And
did you ever play in the main at Res?
I did not. Nope.
Oh,
A couple people mentioned like, oh, I think you'd have a lot of fun trying to play in the main, and I never got to it. So, and this was like right before I left for school too. I remember Tiffany or Landon. They just asked me if I ever thought about playing in the main for like a Sunday morning, and I told them maybe, but I know that they have more rehearsals for that. Like if I were to play on a Sunday, then I'd have to come in like once or twice for rehearsal, and I don't think it ever lined up with my schedule. So. And they wanted to keep me for Thursday nights. So they have to find people to play.
It gets hard when that happens.
That's
when
fair.
you're music directing, you're doing a lot of the behind the scenes type stuff, but are you ever on stage with the band? You playing keys? And do you ever sing?
Yeah. Yep.
Really? I didn't know you sang.
Yeah. It's let's see. When did I start interning there? It was last year. It was like end of May I started interning there.
So May of 2023.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And I would say that's really the first time I had to start singing. I sat down with he used to be the worship director. Now him and his wife moved to New York recently. Jeff, and we just kind of talked about what my goals were for the time that I was there. And I remember right away, like right off the bat, he's like, "Do you sing?" And I'm like, I sing, but I don't know if I'm good at singing, and I've never had to sing for anything.
Yeah.
And I at that point I got pretty nervous up in front of people, right? Because I didn't know how I sounded. I never took any vocal lessons growing up, and so he's like, "All right, we're just gonna start doing it." So he pulled out his guitar and he's like, "Let's just sing a song right now." And just so I was like, "Wait, what?"
Just any song?
It was the first day. Yeah. I think we sang. It was God So Loved. So we started out with it was by like We the Kingdom. So it's kind of like it's like a 6, or it's like a 4/4, kind of a
fun rhythm.
Yeah. It's like
song.
a more upbeat song.
Yeah.
And that was pretty challenging. I probably sounded awful the first time I sang, because we weren't singing like, I wasn't actually, it was weird. I was singing, but I wasn't giving it even probably like 50%. Just because it felt awkward to like fully sing out. Like if I'm on a stage, it's a little different.
Especially when you're in a room with just like one other person. I think that's harder to sing or be vulnerable versus in front of a group of people, which sounds like it wouldn't be that way, but it definitely is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. It's like if you can hear yourself too, that helps. So like I've appreciated what in-ears actually allow you to do. Like I've always used in-ears for like either mixing like my own stuff or projects for school, but it's always been like I'm hearing somebody else's voice. So it's almost like, I don't know. I mean, maybe this isn't true. Maybe it's just me. Like, regardless of how nice the audio quality is, if I'm just listening to a song, like it just is a song. Like, to me, I'm not focused on, like, I'm not noticing those things. So when I first started singing and like turning myself up, like I learned to appreciate all the other, sounds coming in and actually like focusing on how to balance all those if I ever wanted to, right?
Yeah.
And you don't want it to get like too much, right? But especially at a place like that, like it doesn't need to be super fancy, but it was just kind of neat to almost have to relearn some of that stuff and playing too, right? I had to relearn how to play piano to help me sing better, because at that point I was trying to like focus on the piano and just the piano and try to do everything I can, and sometimes I just can't. So that's just the way I am. So I'm like, I can't do everything fancy. It doesn't have to be super fancy. Like, singing is how you lead. Like, you can lead from an instrument, but if you're leading, if you have like a certain theme going and like you want some of the songs to match the scripture, and you're kind of going in a direction and you want to repeat something, then it's a lot more focused on the vocal side of things, because I think that's where most people feel connected, is through the vocals, and then the instrument is like a secondary thing to that. Like, adds everything,
just adds
works.
The color.
Yeah, everything works together, because you can definitely tell like who's playing an instrument, even if you can't hear who's playing it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I can tell if like you're playing bass. I can tell if Aiden's playing keys, and
You mean without seeing?
yeah, without seeing. And I think most
Really, you've memorized my style.
memorize your style. Yeah, all the wrong notes that you've ever played, written them down.
Every service.
Every service. Yeah. But that's just kind of like maybe that's not as common for like normal people. Maybe it's just because I am a musician, or like we're musicians, so we notice a little bit of those smaller details. But I'm like, most of the time I feel like that's the case for me when I'm listening back on like a Sunday recording or like a live stream. Like I'll try to really be like nitpicky on like not necessarily my singing anymore. It's more of like, how is like the flow of the service going? Like, but did I have like an awkward greet, or did I have, did I not word this nicely, or what can I do to make it feel more like, not like, maybe not rehearsed is like a good word to use, but like more inviting, or like more open. I don't know. Jeff really told me to focus on that whenever I started doing that on my own. Like, if I had to do that on my own someday, if that was my job, he's like, you really want to be involved, as involved as you can with the church, right? But then try to accommodate for people. Like, I guess I like to spew off topic a lot, but like I enjoy working with volunteers, especially for like leading rehearsals, because everybody plays differently and everybody has a different way of communicating with each other.
Yeah.
And that's been really helpful for me, especially when volunteering for like a robotics team, like with a bunch of friends, right? Like it's focused on, I've had to like switch my brain on and off to, accommodate for kids, but then also, try to have that same like mindset, with an adult group, right?
Yeah.
But it can be a little bit more, like I can rely on those people a little bit more. But it's just kind of forced me to be open-minded on like what's going on, and try to be like hyper aware. I always joke around saying like this time of year is probably my most productive time of year once robotics starts, because I always try to keep myself on like busy and like on my toes. So if that makes sense. But
Wait, what do you mean it's the most productive? I mean, I get you're probably more productive with robotics because it's robotics season, but
yeah,
how does that make you more productive in the other areas of your life?
Yeah, maybe it's not. Maybe it's a combination of the word productive and like hyper aware is like another good one to use. So like it kind of like it puts me in a good mindset to just kind of constantly be aware of what's going on.
Could it be because it's like you're so busy with robotics, it's like none of this time can be wasted?
Probably, yeah. Because we get a limited time with the kids to, design a robot, and then there's a bunch of other things that go with it too. So it's like, how do we make the most of each meeting? It kind of translates probably over to rehearsals. Like, how do we make the most of this time, this one day we get to meet?
Right.
And that's something I feel like obviously people will like anybody that does what I do, like in my shoes, like that's something that they continue to work on, like throughout their time at a church, I guess. Like as you get to know people, you kind of figure out how to, you just kind of have to step into it sometimes. This is like, oh, I could have done this better. Like maybe I'll prepare this in advance more for next rehearsal, or I'll have in mind like how I kind of want to go through this song a little bit differently. But yeah, it's fun.
So how long does it take to make a robot?
Oh yeah, jump into robotics. We so every year, sometime I forget the start date when they release the new game every year. I should memorize this by now, but yeah,
you really should.
Team, right?
Come on, Brandon.
In September, they release a new game, and the field is the same every year. So like it's a 6x6 grid, and each tile, they're like those foam tiles, and each tile is like, I think it's 2 feet by 2 feet, in dimensions, and then there's like a plexiglass border that goes around the field that's like a foot high.
Yep.
So that stays the same every year, and then each game is different. So they'll have like different like things that you have to do in order to complete tasks for points. So like last year was, they had like the main thing that you scored on was like this backdrop, like on one side of the field, and so you're split up into 2 teams. There's red and blue team, and there's 2 alliances per team. So there's 2 robots competing against 2 robots at all times, and it's all randomized.
It's never a free for all where there's like 6 robots.
No. It's it's never like everyone against everyone type deal, and it's not battle bots. We get asked a lot of those like battle bots questions, like, oh, do you guys like destroy other robots? Like, can you tip other robots over? And it's like, no, it's like that would be fun, but it's more of like completing tasks for points. And then every school has some sort of robotics team. It seems like you don't have to be affiliated with a school to have to compete in this program. There's a ton of different robotics programs out there. This one's the biggest one for middle school in Michigan. There's like 700 teams. I think there's probably more than 700 this year because they keep growing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have 7 weeks to build, design, build, and then program a robot to compete at whatever regionals, districts, if we make it to states, competitions after those 7 weeks. So you can kind of pick and choose which ones you want to go to.
Yeah.
So yeah, then there's so much more to it than just like the thing that moves on the field, right?
Right.
Which is what I kind of like about this program is you can't really win by yourself. You have to actually work with like
different brains.
Yeah. Everyone has to work together collectively, and that's the fun side, especially mentoring, getting to mentor middle schoolers. They're way smarter than I think people give them credit for. And we have, we really try to pick good students that we think would, can at least listen for more than like a couple of seconds, right?
For sure.
It's more of like, we're not looking for students who necessarily can like design stuff or like, oh, I have experience using this design software. I have experience programming. It's like, that's like part of it. But if there's a student who is really good at listening and they're super passionate about other things, but they like can convey that at tryouts, when we have tryouts, then we'll choose that student over some other student who may be really good at designing something, but can't listen or is like super rude, right?
Right.
It's like,
yeah, you got to be a team player.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense, right?
I think that translates into the music world too.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I think getting back to the tryouts thing, like we've gotten asked a lot of questions by parents, like, okay, why can't you guys have like everyone join, right? Because even that kid that like may have trouble paying attention or is like really rude, like those are skills that he can still work on if he joins the team, right? And we only have it's only my friend group, so it's like 5 mentors, and the max you're allowed per team before you have to split up into more teams is 15 kids. And,
okay.
So it's 5 mentors split up between, we have 13. And that's like, we feel like it's the most like comfortable number. Like each student gets to pick kind of like what subgroup they want to go in. So like once we're done with the brainstorming part of things, like right away, like figuring out the game, like what do we want to do? How do we score? The kids will do like robot brainstorming, brainstorm what they want the robot to accomplish and like what strategy they want to implement for the game. They'll split off into different subgroups. So like there's programming, build, design, marketing, which is like presentation, portfolio stuff.
Yeah.
And then each one of us will kind of take over that group. So I kind of hop around with I mostly stick with design, but then I hop around with the marketing group too, because that's a lot of fun. That's like the creative side, so that you get some students who may not enjoy the CADing or like the programming side of things or build. So then they can do that stuff, right? Like there's a lot more.
What is marketing? What do you mean by that? Because I'm thinking of they're trying to sell this to other people.
Kind of, it's like promoting the team. So like doing a lot of community event stuff.
Gotcha.
Yep. And you don't have to do that, right? Like if you want, so there's different awards. There's like robot related awards. And then there's like team related awards. And the most prestigious one in this program is called the Inspire Award. And it's kind of, the name is pretty
Inspire Award?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's kind of like your team has really done well in all the categories kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I think in the actual description of the awards, it's like a role model team is like the first sentence. So it's like, okay, what does that mean? Right? Like you could have a great robot and like just destroy the competition. But then if you like, you don't necessarily, you can't win that award every single time, even though your robot might be the greatest. Like another team that really tries to promote their team by like going to like company tours or like sponsors, right? Because a lot of teams have sponsors to give them money for the season, because none of this stuff is free, right?
Right. It's not funded by the school?
No. Some schools do.
Okay.
We do not. So, I mean, I think last season, just for traveling, because the kids made it to Worlds last year, that was around like 23 or 24 and a half grand just for travel, just to get there.
As in 24,000? Yep. Wow. That's a lot.
Yep. And
that's crazy.
That was not including food. So that was hotel. That was everything else though. That was hotels. Like we had to figure out modes of transportation to get like around in Houston. It was in Houston, Houston's fun, but they had to experience Houston for the first time. So most of them grew up here in Zealand. So, but yeah, it was like 24 and a half grand, I think. If I remember correctly, just for like travel and hotels and everything else. And then parents organized food while we were there. And then we actually had a GoFundMe, and part of that money I would say most of the money from the GoFundMe was actually for just food. So like each student got like a certain amount of cash, like if they wanted to, like if we weren't having like a team dinner or like a team meal, then they could go out and get food and stuff with their parents. So that was kind of fun. But yeah, a lot of the fundraising stuff is kind of up to the team. So most of it is sponsors last year. So 2 companies that usually sponsor us in like robot parts kind of way.
Yeah.
They gave us a bunch of money for travel when the team found out that we were making it to Houston. So that was awesome. And I would say most teams, it's like that. They get money from sponsors and like various people who want to donate money, which is still sponsors, right?
Yeah.
Not specifically like companies. And then some teams do like different fundraisers, like Hungry Howie's is a popular one and around in Zealand. Like I don't know, Chipotle, like any restaurant fundraiser,
nice.
right?
Yeah.
And the GoFundMe was just a simple idea that one of the parents had. It's like any money you can get, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just go to travel. But yeah, that was the travel cost side of it last year was the big one. But anyways, going back to where do we kind of veer off from? I was talking about like the actual season.
So the original question that got us into robotics is how long does it take to make a robot?
Yep.
And then you were talking about marketing team.
Oh yeah, different subgroups.
Yeah, different subgroups.
And then you asked about marketing. So Yeah, I think the biggest thing with the robotics program, and it's like this one specifically, is like promoting the program. So last year, the only reason they made it to Worlds was they won that Inspire Award at the state level, which got them a slot. And I think they were only accepting, like, in Michigan, out of like the 700 plus teams, it was like 12 slots that allotted you to go to Houston.
Yeah.
And so to get like in one of those slots was like a huge achievement for them. But most of it is promoting the actual program. So like once we got there, we kind of got a feel for like what the competition is like at the top level.
Yeah.
Like the students still wanted to try to go for that award still at Worlds, right?
Yeah.
And if you win the award at the state level, that allows you to get to Worlds. You have the right to compete for it and actually like try, like present. They presented like some presentation, and then they had a portfolio that they made throughout the season. You can do all that. Like if you didn't win it at the state level, then you weren't allowed to partake for that award.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. And so it was like the best of the best. And a lot of those teams that like made it to the finals for that award, a lot of them like started their own teams. And it's hard to do at the middle school level because like limited resources, right? It's not even, I would say it's mostly not even a resource thing, like money thing. It's people who can actually like coach a team, or like,
Yeah.
because like you can't just, it's really hard for somebody to step into like this program without having a couple of years of, or even like a year of experience already. So like
Right.
my buddies and I, we did that all throughout high school, right? So we had like 4-5+ years just of that program experience.
So you were doing robotics in high school yourself?
Yep. Same program, just at the high school level.
Okay. Were you one of the students in that, or were you always just a mentor?
Yep. One of the students. Yep. And so like coming back to mentor, we had a huge advantage because we knew what the actual like program was.
Yeah.
And like you can be the best engineer ever. And like, I'm not an engineer, but you can be the best engineer ever and not know how to teach. So like
That's true.
It can go both ways, and that's a lot of fun because it's challenging for who's ever like coaching or mentoring too. Like you're learning right alongside the kids, and like one of the best teams in Michigan, our sister team technically. They're the other Zeeland middle school. Zeeland has 2 middle schools, Cityside and Creekside. The coach of that team, he's an actual like teacher at that school, and he's helped mentor the team in high school when we were in the high school team, like a couple years ago. But him and his brother actually, so his brother works at a company. He's an engineer at some company in Zeeland, Holland. And the two of them run that team. And it's the same thing, right? Like he has a lot more like teaching experience. So he's really good at connecting with the kids. And you know, laying the foot down when he needs to. But then he has his brother who's also good at the like very specific like robotics stuff.
Yeah.
Not saying that you don't have to be an engineer to be really good at that stuff too, which is kind of cool as well. Like,
right.
I'm not an engineer. Like all my friends went to school for that.
But could what you're doing translate into you becoming a good engineer?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like that's not on my radar anytime soon, but like part of the fun thing about robotics specifically is like the skills that you learn, like it's not just necessarily for engineering. Like I think engineering is a lot of problem solving.
Well, yeah, programming in CAD is.
Yep, that's very specific, right? Like,
yeah.
So they get some of the actual like robot related, like mechanical stuff, like programming stuff. So like software and mechanical. So they get that experience, which is still a big part of engineering, regardless of what you're doing. There's some useful skills in there, but then like the marketing side of things, like they you have to be able to talk to people and actually like work as a team. And that's the biggest part of the whole program. And like, it sounds cheesy to say that. It's like, it's not just about the robot, but like experiencing all the ups and downs of last year, like from our side, like mentors, like, not spending a ton of late nights at the school, right? Like that's a goal that we tried to have this year.
Right.
And there were other things too, like how we like didn't plan out some things very well. It's just like, we're just going to kind of wing it today. And like sometimes after each, some of our meetings we're like, wow, we really didn't accomplish as much as we wanted to because we didn't have a game plan, like us mentors didn't have a game plan going in.
Yeah.
So it's like being able to admit that to like as a group after the season and still say like, hey, these are some things that, we're going to try to hold each other accountable for. Like that's huge. And I think that's like that's one step in becoming more of a successful like team consistently. It's just like better experience for the kids, but also better experience for us.
Right.
So, because this is all still volunteer stuff. Like Chase, he's the coach of the actual team. He gets paid like $1,500 for the whole season from like Cityside directly. So the school technically gives him money, but it's $1,500.
Yeah,
I think we technically equated it to like 3 cents an hour last season. One of the kids like did some math for it, and he's like, "Yeah, you roughly get paid like 3 or 4 cents an hour." It's kind of funny. So he spent most of that money just for like he bought the team like a 3D printer, or like bought the team like parts that we order from online or something from various vendors. So didn't really use that money for anything personal. But I think that's what most people do. If schools give them like a certain amount of money, they just use it for the team.
Well, could it be that eventually when you win state or worlds enough, the school will look at this and say, hey, we should
that's a great question.
More money into this?
Yeah, absolutely. They allotted us a classroom this year. It's still used throughout the day, like normal teaching hours, but it's only for 1 hour a day. And so they're like, you guys can have this space. You'll have to work alongside of whoever teaches in that classroom during the day, just to make sure we're not hogging up the whole classroom necessarily, right? But we get we have enough space in that room for a full field. And how it's been in years past is we would usually buy like half the field. So like every year when the new game's released, like as soon as it's released, you can do pre-orders too of like what the field's going to be. So you get the field parts and they have to get it to you within like a week.
Yeah.
And we've only used to buy like half the field because we never had space for the full field, even though we had all the tiles and all the other stuff to do it. We just didn't have the space. I should be aware that we had the space, but we had to like tear it down afterwards. So it wasn't really worth, spending half an hour setting up the field and then tearing it down every single meeting,
right?
Especially when you meet like 3 or 4 times a week. So it's like, as soon as we get our own space, then we'll consider it. And yeah, they gave us a classroom this year and we can use like the whiteboard in that room, and it has a TV like on an arm. So it's pretty updated. And I think that's even better than most teams, right? Like there's probably a lot of teams out there that don't have even a whiteboard to do stuff on, or even like their own space for a field. But then, we're allowed to leave that just set up. And that room is usually locked after the 1 hour that they teach in there, and people can like walk by the windows and see the field. But then we're also allowed to use the space like around that classroom. So like right outside the classroom, around the corner down the hall is they call it the LGI Center. I don't exactly know what it stands for, but it's like an updated like kind of I don't know. It's like a space for just learning. So they have a bunch of breakout rooms. And each breakout room has like a sliding door, so you can have like privacy if you want it.
Yeah.
But each room has a whiteboard and a couple tables set up in it, which is awesome because we can split them up into groups for like brainstorming, whatever, or like if programming wants to meet somewhere else, then they can go in one of those rooms and do stuff, like hook up a laptop or TV or something. And then all of our tools, they gave us like storage space, like up in a loft, like downstairs. So where everything's upstairs right now, like all of our main, like our field's upstairs. So it's kind of nice because it's separate from the rest of the school. So like whenever they have like basketball games or like sporting events going on in the gym there, then it's not on the same floor as that. So like whenever we're meeting, sometimes it conflicts. So it's kind of like
conflicts as in noise wise,
or just like a lot of people too, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes that can be a little distracting,
right?
But yeah, it's tremendous, just that they've been able to give us all that space to use. It's not like our space, right? But the fact that we can at least set up a full field and then store our tools somewhere, like that's huge.
You would just think that there would be more funding for this kind of thing because of all you're learning a lot of valuable skills.
Yep. And this. It's been hard for Zealand, I think, to advocate for more of that because it's a very sports heavy district, which is fair. Like there's a lot of sports and there's a lot of kids, right? But I think that's
And
for
Dutch
any,
tall people
right,
who play sports.
and that's for like any district, right? So
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, so I'll say this first. The coach for Creekside, I probably shouldn't say his name.
Yeah, don't say his name.
But we had him all as a teacher in middle school. So
Yeah.
like he's a great guy, and we know him like personally outside the team. He has been trying to advocate for, like, he's been trying to go to the board to get some more money, like the state to get more money for first programs. And the biggest argument against it is there's not enough success yet, because they're one of the most consistent, like, best teams in the state, but there's not enough like success in Zealand is what they say to actually allow that. And that's, it kind of sucks, because I think that the future of kind of some of the future of learning is headed towards like robotics. I'm seeing it a lot. Like, it's becoming more popular every year. So like, and each school is like implementing something like similar to that. Like Granville, like they just had like a $4 or $5 6 million building installed just for robotics. And like part of the reason why it was so expensive is because they want to have they want to host events there, is what I've heard. So like that building accommodates like them being able to host like 40, 50, 60 plus teams there that are all using power at the same time. Right.
Yeah.
Like, so like that's part of the reason why that building is so stinking expensive. And plus it's just a separate building from just for robotics. So like there's probably a bunch of tools in there that they can use. And I know Granville has, a ton of people that are on like different, they have multiple robotics teams for high school and middle school, I think. But yeah, I mean, that'd be awesome to have that for Zealand and try to get like all the schools together and make like a small-ish building or separate building for just a space for robotics or learning.
Yeah, it just seems like that's how you get it to get more successful.
Yeah, and I think I am almost positive that I hear the dog.
I know. It's. I hope it's not going through the mics, but you never know.
Yeah.
Oh well. If you guys can hear it barking, I'm sorry.
That's funny. They're probably like, man, his voice, there's like some weird reverb to it. But I think that it will happen over time. It's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah,
for
it's just not there yet.
No, not yet. But I mean, maybe somebody will finally be like, oh, that's I shouldn't say finally. Maybe somebody will decide to really try to help us or advocate for that on the board, or somebody who has,
You need to walk into the school board and slam your clipboard down and say, "This is what we need."
Yeah. It's I think the biggest thing too with a lot of schools before they even consider doing something like that is like they need to see numbers, like participation. So last year we had like, I think it was 63, 64 kids that tried out, and we only had like 4 or 5 slots. And because we weren't able to split off into 2 teams.
And each slot is 1 kid?
Yeah. So we had a couple kids graduating, and then we had a couple returners, right?
Yeah.
And most of the time, like every kid still has to try out every year. But most of the time, the same returners end up making the team again, right? Which is fair. But we still give everybody a chance. And I mean, this year it was like 40, close to 50 kids. So, I mean, I would say there's a lot of participation there, right?
Yeah.
And people are at least interested in seeing what the program is. And it's really hard to explain what it is to parents that have no idea. Because they're like, we had a couple parents come up to us last season after like it was all over. And like we've gotten to know them throughout the season at that point, and we've got to know their kids, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like one big family at that point. And they're like, wow, like we didn't realize like how much, like how involved it was. Like we didn't realize how intense like the season can be. Like my kid was learning and putting in so many hours every week doing this on top of like trying to do their best in school.
Yeah. Well, most people just see the end result. They don't know how much time and effort is actually put into things.
Yeah. And that's where it's kind of going off topic a little bit. Like that's where the marketing, that's where the marketing subgroup can be a lot of fun, because it's like, maybe part of your goal for that season in that group is figuring out how to like get your team out there. Like what you do? Like what do you guys do? And like choosing not to step in too much as a mentor unless you absolutely have to is hard, because you want to do that stuff. And there are some things that you do, but you let them, take charge. Like if you're not letting the students take charge, then there's really no point, because they're not going to have fun. They're not going to learn, and you're not going to learn either. Right.
Yeah.
So it hurts. Like nobody wins.
Right.
If it's just mentor led, but you still want to have that level of competitiveness too. And that's the hardest balance. Like again, we had parents, that when their kids didn't make it, the biggest question was like, oh, why can't you guys have like 50? Why can't you guys accept all 50 kids, 60 kids? And it's like, I wish we could. I really do.
Yeah.
But we just can't. We don't have the mentors, and we think that that's a huge deal, because if you have like 4 or 5 kids that do everything, like more than half the team's not going to be able to do anything, and they're just going to not have fun. Like what learning is going to be done?
Right. Well, that's just how the world works, though. Like not everybody's going to be able to get in, and I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I do feel bad. Like,
yeah, right. It's sad, but it's at the same time, it's just not realistic to have everybody do it.
That was this season, especially, because Chase has only been head coach for 2 years.
Yeah.
I'll say that. You can edit that out if you want.
Well, they don't know his last name, so nobody's going to know. There's plenty of people named Chase.
I'll say where he lives in his soch, but afterwards, but this is his second year like as head coach, and he's had to learn so much on like how to communicate with parents, and how to like communicate with like our friend group, because like none of us wanted to be teachers, right? Like none of us are teaching for our jobs,
right?
And I would say even for the rest of the guys, like I think working at a church, it's different, because I just see a lot of people, and I just get to do a lot of that stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like part of what I do.
Yeah.
Like they might get to, I'm not saying that they don't get to talk to a lot of people, but it's a little bit different, because I think it's very easy for them to do their own thing. Like they can have meetings all one day, and then the next day he can just be sitting in his office, just, working on his own project, just tuned out to the rest of the world. So sometimes it's harder for them, I think, to connect, or actually like work on some of those other skills is like the best way to say it. And like not in a mean way at all. Like I have my own things to work on, right? Like I'm not an engineer. So like all the ideas I have when we're just talking about specifically like robot ideas, like when we're prototyping stuff with the students, like I might have an idea, but I don't know how to explain it, or like I don't know the math behind it. I don't know how to do that. And like if I'm not honest with them, and like if I'm like, oh, I can do this by myself, like I got it. like I know everything that's going on. If I don't listen to them, like they went to school for that, right? So you kind of all have to work together, and like it helps that we're friends, right?
Right.
Like throughout high school and everything. So like we know each other very personally on that level. And that's not the same for a lot of other people, I don't think. And that's a huge upside to, I think, our team. We've talked to so many other teams that have a lot of it is run differently. A lot of the mentors may do a lot of this stuff, and fair. But we care about more the students kind of leading more of it, even though it might be harder to teach them down the line. We might be way behind on the robot, but we can still be really competitive. We think it just may take a lot more time because they're trying to do it. We're trying to teach them.
So you prioritize teaching the students rather than prioritizing winning in this instance.
Yep. And I'm not saying that we are not like super competitive. Like
right.
Like I think not without like bragging. I think we have the skills collectively to like make a good robot.
You and your friends.
Something that competes well, right? Definitely not we're not saying we're the best robot, because some of the stuff at the highest level is just crazy. Like like they have, I'll explain that in a second. It's different at the higher level too, in terms of like competitiveness. But yeah, I think we have the skills to like have to like reach the students' goals, if that makes sense. Like we always try to tell them, like, if you want to do something, don't try to limit yourself on like what you've seen other teams do. Like just because you've seen another team do something not successful doesn't mean it's doesn't mean it's impossible to do. Right. But you also have to be like, teach them some of the real world. Like, okay, realistic doesn't necessarily mean don't go with an idea. Realistic may mean how are you going to spend your time? What are your goals when you're trying to prototype something, like, or when you're having a meeting? Like, are you just like, if you don't log some of this information down, like it may seem boring, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm just going to sit here testing out a wheel, acting upon like a game piece. if I'm trying to pick what wheel we want, there could be like 10 different wheels that we want and all our different shapes and sizes and stuff, and like what kind of rubber are on the wheel. I'm being really specific here, but like if they're not logging all the information down, like what they see, the next meeting, they could waste like 30 minutes trying to do the same thing they did the other meeting. So it's like stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to prioritize their time and you know, what are you capable of, right? Like how are you guys, like you're middle schoolers, right? So like you probably have a lot more to learn than what we do sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So like you have to work together at that area too. Like if you want to aim high, that's awesome. Go for it.
Yep.
But like we'll try to help you reach your goal as best as we can. But we're also not going to let you go down a path that's like hurtful. If we think it's going to be like hurtful or like not productive,
right,
then we'll say something, right? Because I think that's there's like that's hard too to balance, right? Like sometimes you want to let them fail, but other times like you want to step in and actually prevent that because you know it won't be like beneficial. You know that they'll be able to understand it, like why it's hurtful. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not explaining it this way. But I really feel like it's just a balance a lot of the times. That's really how you get. That's how you learn and that's how you get better. But yeah, I think I mentioned something about like different competitiveness levels at like,
there's like a higher level.
Yeah. So in Michigan, the program is first robotics. And they have separate like robotics programs ish. So like the high school that we did, you build a bigger robot and it competes on like a bigger field, way bigger field. So that's FRC, First Robotics Competition, and that's just high school in Michigan, and everywhere else. But in Michigan, they only allow the middle school team to compete with the FTC program, which is First Tech Challenge. That's like supposed to be middle school level, you know, it leads you into FRC. It's a smaller robot, smaller field, like way smaller field. But it's still super competitive. The unfortunate thing is every other state in the world or every other state in the US and like every other country, they allow high schoolers to compete. So they were going up against like high schoolers in Houston.
So Michigan doesn't allow?
Nope. And I don't know what the decision process was behind that, like originally, but they can't change that right now. There's not like a good way to change that or limit it for all the other like states in countries, because there's like thousands and thousands of teams out there for FTC now. And if they were to regulate like, oh, you have to be middle school to compete, they're going to lose more than half their teams. So like they don't want to, I know they're not going to want to do that, but then you can't just say, oh yeah, Michigan high schoolers can compete in Michigan because you know, you have already said that like high schoolers can only compete for FRC. So there's not really a good way to do it since they made that decision. But that's the I want to say downside, because there are some pros for them to compete at that level, but like they can't drive. Like these middle schoolers can't drive yet. Like some of the teams we were going
legally.
Against, yeah, right. Some of them bike to school, right? So maybe I guess they can sleep there, right? But some of these high school teams at the top level, or a lot of them, are right out of somebody's like garage. So like they've been competing through FRC. Like they did Lego League, which is like first Lego League, which is, you know, like preschool first through like fifth grade. Some of these top teams their kids on their team have been competing since that level all the way up and through like senior year high school, right?
Yeah.
So like they're not affiliated necessarily with a school all the time at these top teams, but they don't have a ton of like, it's not like a consistent thing forever. So like a lot of these top teams, they are super successful, and then they may just die out for a season. They may just be done because their kids graduate and then they move on to college. So like what we're trying to do for the middle school team in Zealand is something that really hasn't really been done before, and that's trying to make it sustainable. So like when we leave, like, cause I don't want to be doing this forever. I don't think maybe, right? Maybe I'll be doing it as long as I can. But like, if we take a step down for a couple of years and like somebody else steps up, then we want it to still be a continual, like, okay, you are going to get this certain amount of money from these sponsors as long as you keep up with the sponsors. Right.
Yeah.
Like not a lot of teams.
Who would
able to do
you
that.
want to replace you? Would it be the former students as the mentors?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I went to Cityside for middle school. So like, I know that place, you know, I've been around it. It feels weird going back now, like stepping foot in that school every time. All my other friends went to Creekside, so the other middle school.
Is Cityside like Zealand's middle school?
Yep.
Is that one closer to the city? And Creekside
Yeah,
is...
Cityside is actually like right downtown Zealand. So,
yeah, right.
So
and then Creekside
Creekside's like less than 3-4 minutes away.
Oh,
So
I thought it was going to be like out in the farmland.
No, it's like right down the road. So yeah, it's everything's close to, even the high school is like right down the road. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, Cityside used to be the high school. So that's where both my parents went to high school. So, or at least my mom went there. My dad went to Holland Christian.
So you guys just have been Dutch as long as you've been alive.
I know. Can't you tell, dude? Come on. What? No. Yeah. Pretty much. I'm like one of the most Dutch Korean people you ever meet in your life.
Noted.
Besides the height. I mean.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah.
You got
Lacking.
me. You guys got me on the height, but I mean, you're not even Dutch, but I mean, you're still tall. Yeah, I feel like all my friends are way taller than me.
I'm the most non-Dutch looking person because I have the
fair.
blonde hair and blue eyes, but
That is fair,
I have
yeah.
almost no Dutch.
Yeah. That's funny.
So you do robotics and you're a mentor.
Yep. I can talk about that. I can talk your ear off for forever about that
Oh,
stuff,
I know.
right?
But you also are doing the worship directing, which is a couple leadership positions. Is there a future Pastor Brandon coming?
Future Pastor Brandon. I don't think so. Not right now.
Oh,
Not right now.
that means it's going to happen.
Right.
Every time you say you don't want to do something or it's not going to happen, you're like, that's the one it does.
Yeah. It's not on the radar right now. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to say. Like, I don't know the future. Like, I try really hard to take some time and pray about stuff. Like, that may sound a bit weird to say, but like, I don't know. Sometimes I have no idea. Like, I feel like if I'm not just as a Christian, but like if I'm not constantly trying to, talk to God about some of that stuff, then like I'm doing it by myself.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really hard for me to do. It's really hard for me to take time and like talk to God about it. Cause sometimes I feel like I have to do it by myself, or I feel like it's easy, right? It's, what's the good word? Like, it feels like it's fine, right? It's fine if I do it myself. And like, I think somebody told me, like, I don't remember who told me this. It was pretty good advice. It was like, whether or not they meant it to be advice or not, they're like, you're going to make a decision at the end of the day by yourself, regardless, even if it's not something that you talk to God about, or like, even if it's not something that God gives you for sure answer on, like you still have to make a decision sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Like he's still going to be there
Right.
with you. And like that was pretty helpful. It was just good to keep in mind. Not trying to like advocate for like doing it by yourself, but like,
Right. No, I know what you're saying.
Like,
Because we've actually said this a couple times on this podcast, but I think sometimes you do have options when, so it's like you choose something and it's like you said, God's still there, unless it's something that you obviously shouldn't be doing, but that we all know that.
Yeah. I mean, it's even for that stuff, like sometimes it's still like, it's really easy to get caught up in something and then like months go by, like a year goes by and you're like, oh, well, like, and maybe still like, even in those moments, it's like, I mean, so maybe I'll get a little personal here. This is kind of neat. My dad, I didn't know this about him until he told me like couple of years ago. He like grew up in Zealand, Holland all his life. And he was really big into computers, and he's a programmer now. So he started getting into it like right when programming was starting to become big. Like they just started offering classes like back in his day. I say that like he's like 1,000 years old. Sorry, Dad, but he told me that he just kind of just up and left. Like when he graduated high school, he didn't want to have anything to do with like the church or like his family, and not that he didn't love his family,
Right.
Like he just wanted to do his own thing. And I didn't know that about him. And he moved to Colorado, because that was the big where all the programmers were at the time. And his plan was to try to go to school in Colorado and get a job, get a job there, and like as a programmer. And he found out very quickly that wasn't his path. Like all throughout college, so he went to GVSU for a couple of years, and went and took
GVSU was here 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, right. So he went here for college. I should say. I think I got mixed up. He went here for college. He was going to try to move to Colorado to get a job. Sorry.
Yeah.
And like right at the end of like right before he left, he told me one of his professors just sat down and talked with him, and he's just like, what do you want to do with your life? And he never actually thought about it. He just was like, I know I like computers, but I've never actually thought about like what I wanted to do specifically. So like he just decided that he was going to do his own thing. Like he said he was a Christian, but he said he didn't like actively try to pray about some of that stuff. And he just wasn't able to find anything out there. And then he had to come back home and you know, like he had great parents that still loved him. Right. Like,
yeah.
And that's super important. But like he's one of the most like, I'm fortunate enough to say that he's someone that I look up to in that sense, but he like really tries to stress the importance of like spending intentional time out of your day doing that stuff. Like in it, you don't have to have like a specific goal in mind. Like
right.
You don't have to feel like you're gonna gain so much wisdom or you're gonna gain so much biblical knowledge all the time. It's just read stuff or like just pray.
Yeah.
You don't have to like pray it a certain way either. Like
yeah, it doesn't have to. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have to be a big deal.
Mm-hmm. And like I know very little about like any theology stuff, right? And like part of my I know, right?
But you're reformed.
I know, right? But like I felt like that was a huge like downside to like me personally, like when I was applying to like different churches, like even not even in that sense, like if I wanted to step into like worship leading or like just worship in general, somebody who like leads a group of people, right?
Yeah.
In worship, like sometimes I felt underqualified to even like do that. And I mean there's been a lot of things that have helped me think about that stuff and like to get me to a point where I'm like okay with that like that's fine. Like I'm not gonna just say that's it. Like I'm not gonna, you know, I'll always try to be, you know, gaining knowledge or like wisdom where I can from like people like that are, you know, pastors or like spend their whole life, you know, devoted to this like teaching stuff, right? But like the cool thing is about like worship leading, even like with anything involved with the church, like whether it's volunteer, whether you work there, I think that like because I'm trying to quote the book that I got this from a little bit. I read a book called The Worship Pastor by Zach Hicks. It was recommended to me by Jeff at first, and we kind of went through this book together while I was interning there. And he the guy who wrote the book has like been around to a bunch of different churches, and like big and small. Yeah. And he had like the same question at the end of the book, and it was a great way he wrapped it up. He was like, we're all broken, right? But we've all like, some of us are called to try out this like worship pastor thing or like worship director thing. And I maybe it sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's like, that was a great way of putting it because at the end of the day, like, I don't know, it's, you just have to spend as much time as you can. Like, even though it's sometimes it's overwhelming, like part of the job is like getting to experience some of that stuff, like as a worship, somebody who's in worship. Like there's just a lot of things that I hear like throughout the week. It's like some people come in with like, you know, this is what's going on in my life, whether or not they like mean to share it with you. Like that's what you see in a church setting. And it's really made me think of how different people are coming in to the church like every Sunday morning, because I mean, a lot of them don't have a worship pastor job. Some of them may just sit in an office all day or like deal with people. So it's like, I forget sometimes that like people go through that stuff, if that makes sense. It's like all my buddies, like they have very similar jobs, but like, you know, they might not have they might not know what to do in their free time sometimes, right?
Right.
So it's like, how can I try to minister even though I'm not like worshiping at robotics even? Like, this sounds cheesy, right? But like, how can I minister to the kids still there, and to my friend group, like outside of the church? Like, that's one area I can do that in. Or like, if I'm volunteering in another church, like I can do the same thing. Like even at home, right? It's a constant challenge, and I enjoy it. But it's definitely, it can be hard. So
what can be hard? Like
just keeping up with
other people's lives.
Yeah. That and trying to be intentional, like as intentional as I can, with whatever time I have. Because they're every day almost. I would say they're every day, like right before I go to bed. This is like, I don't want to do anything else. I was gonna go to sleep. Like, I know I didn't spend any time praying today. I know I didn't do any of that, but like, I don't really feel like it. And even if it's like 30 seconds to say a prayer, like 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's long when you're
know?
tired and you're
Right?
ready to go to bed.
And it's like, sometimes I'm just sitting there doing absolutely nothing, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I can do that. I can physically do that, and I still decide not to do it sometimes. And it's like, strive to get better, right? And I just hope to be able to have Jesus on my mind consistently that much.
Yeah.
Like that is a real goal that I have, because I feel like there's every single time where like it's related to the job, like where I've felt challenged, like every single time, I'm able to like just keep him like, above all the other like stresses. Like, it does help. It does. And even if he doesn't give you an answer directly, like he's still there. Right.
Right.
And like sometimes he shows you like down the line too. Like my dad said that he's never like, you hear some people say like, oh, God spoke to me. God said this to me. Like I heard a voice. Cool. Like that's awesome. But like my dad and I, like we've never heard a voice. Right.
I haven't either.
Yeah. And my dad said like one time there was like an internal like job posting at his work now. And this was a couple years ago, and he was thinking about applying for it. So he prayed, and he like, is this, I think he said like, is this like the right thing for me to do? Like, I'm going to have to spend some more time away from home, to like get trained for this. Like, just give me a sign. And he was expecting like something audible, like, maybe he wasn't expecting it, but like, it would be nice. Right.
Yeah.
And didn't hear anything. Like he just kept praying, and after a week, he decided to apply for it, and they actually terminated the position. So like they just made it something else, or they weren't. That position wasn't gonna be a thing, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so he was like, okay. I mean, that would have been fun to do, because it was just different than what he was doing.
Yeah.
And on the way home, he said that he passed like 6 or 7 billboards, and they all had the word no on them. And like in the back of his mind, he's like, okay, I can think like, yeah, that's just coincidence, right? But like maybe in some wacky way, like that was his way of telling you no, right? I enjoy hearing like some stuff like that from him, because it's like, I don't know how God works because I'm not God.
Right.
I like to think that, like I can see God working through that in that way. Who am I to even like think that, right?
Yeah.
Like he works in ways that I can't even imagine, right? And this is the same. this is maybe this is not a good way to say it. Like it's the same for like the devil, right? Like he works in ways that I can't, right?
Yeah, it's true.
It's both ways. Like,
well, because it does say that he comes disguised as an angel of light. So it is, they can, right? I don't want to say it the wrong thing either, but they can work similarly.
Yeah. Words are fun, right? It's like in your head you like understand what you're in your head, but you like can't put it to words. It's like, what? That doesn't even make sense.
Yeah. Well, because I don't want to say that God and the devil are on the same level.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I get
Which
you
is
there.
not what I'm saying, but
Yep.
the ways that they work, it sometimes can both be confusing.
But yeah, I enjoy hearing stuff like that from him. He's always like he's not like telling me, like challenging me necessarily. He just like tells me that stuff, like when we're just talking randomly, and like I take that like that impacts me a lot. It's like it just sticks with me, you know. It's like he said one time he was just reading the Bible, and he I was shoot it was it was Moses like parting the Red Sea, right? And he just reread that just because, and he asked me to think about, he's like, just out of the blue, just random conversation. He's like, you know, you're involved with like, you listen to a lot of worship songs and like you're very musical. And he's like, do you ever really believe like if there's lyrics in a song that say like it refers to like the earth is like God's, right? So the water is like living, like the air is like breathing, right? Like he's like, what do you think about that kind of stuff? And I was like I didn't really put much thought into it, honestly. And he's like, the reason why I asked is I'm just was reading like Moses part of the Red Sea, and he's like it talks about like in the Bible, like or when David was like singing and like praising God, like some of his lyrics, and they were like the water even like fears him. Like when Jesus told the water to be still, he's like, the water like listened to him. So like, can you take that as like the water listens, like it's alive, right? See, it's just a random question that he had, that he had for me.
And what was your answer? Is water alive?
I said sure. I said
sure.
Water can be alive. Maybe I can't understand it, but sure.
Well, does it? No, it doesn't breathe. I don't think it breathes. I was going to say, technically, you could make an argument that it does eat, because it does, you know, like
bunch of like stuff.
People get swallowed up in water all the time.
Yeah. Oh, you're going down that route.
Yeah. Well, I'm not. Yeah. Yeah, I am.
Me trying to get scientific, even though I know nothing really. Caleb's like, oh yeah, well, people drown, so like water eats people.
Well, I said a case could be made.
That's funny.
But it doesn't breathe. So
yeah. That's funny though.
Well, great. We were due for an awkward silence.
Yeah. We just ponder what we talked about. No dog barking. So
no dog barking. That's true. So that was a long answer to you're probably not going to be a pastor anytime soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. I ramble so many times. I just get off topic.
But that's what makes you Brandon.
Right? It's like, dude, just answer the stinking question. Like, yes or no. Like, do you think you're going to be pastor? Not right now, no. Not at this point.
Well, the long answers make for good podcasting. It gets into the in-depth questions. Fair. That's what's so.
So it's like funny, you look back and you're like, well, this was actually the question I asked you, and we ended on like, does Bigfoot exist?
That is a good question. Do you think Bigfoot exists?
What's your... I don't think so.
I think that it's like something demonic if it does exist.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe that's the whole argument of aliens too.
I've heard that. I think, yeah. I mean,
because who is it? Is it Ezekiel who sees the big wheel with all the eyes in the sky or whatever? Yeah, I can't remember if that's Ezekiel.
Whatever angel it was supposed to be.
Yeah, and people have equated that to, I just picked my nose on camera or scratched my nose. Oops.
Yeah. You're going to edit that in. You're just going to be like, yeah, like.
People have equated the angel with all the eyes, like the wheel, as like a UFO.
Oh, that's fair.
So, I don't know. There's been arguments made that aliens and stuff is like the spiritual making itself being able to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, I think nowadays, like, people have a harder time. I would say, especially with like all the technology going around, like I think it's easier to pretend that stuff doesn't exist. Like the spiritual side of things isn't real. It's like you want to be able to physically see this stuff. It like kind of goes back to like, I've never heard a voice of God or like the voice of God, like speaking to me. Right.
Right.
Like, that doesn't mean he's not real. Right. But like, I used to think that that's the only way I can know for sure is if he actually talks to me and says something to me. And he's like, nope, like I'm going to make a decision. Right. But he might not show me those things until like later, like down the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe Bigfoot is also just some random creature out there that only lives in like a remote area where all these rumors stem from.
Yeah,
It's
that we've never found.
It's actually some random dude, just super tall, some weird genetics, is like all hair, you know.
It'd be funny if all these years there's like a family that just ran around in those
my
costumes, just never got caught.
You imagine if you stumbled across a cabin in like in the middle of Alaska, like wherever the story is stemmed from, in the middle of Alaska, and you walk in and it's like deserted, but you see like furry, like Bigfoot costumes on the wall. Like, I don't know what I would think of that. This is like, what the heck?
And like, each one has like a year, decade when it was
like made number one on in like news lines, like 2004. That's funny.
All right. Well, Brandon, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely.
It was great to hear all of your adventures.
Yeah, adventures.
And all the things that you're doing. So
I'm yet another person living their life.
Yet another person living their life.
Trying to do God's work.
Well, it sounds like you are doing God's work. So
I appreciate it.
Thanks again. And everybody listening, have a blessed week. And if the dog was in the recording, I'm sorry. Bye.